The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Kalshi. Make real money predicting sports. Kalshi is available in every state. You can also get $20 for free when you sign up with the code SGPN. That's Kalshi, promo code SGPN. And welcome, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Currently Sunday afternoon, February 8th, around 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm Rosso Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into the preview of the three upcoming events. Once again, three, so a bunch of matches, should be fun, but either way, we have two hard court events and one clay event. So we have Buenos Aires, which of course is going to be the clay event, followed by Dallas and Rotterdam, which are both indoor hard court. So once again, should be a fun blend of clay and hard court, and hopefully make some money in the process. Now, before we get into the recap of the last episode for the Montpellier final, a reminder, support the show by liking and subscribing on YouTube. Podcasts can also be found audio only on Spotify or Apple. Plus, you can also find the show on the SGPN app, free to download in the App Store. So if you want access to all of our picks and podcasts in one easy location, instead of having to go to different streams, you can find it on the SGPN app, free to download in the App Store. Plus, a reminder, check out the merch store on the actual SGPN website. A lot of great tennis merch, sweatshirts, t-shirts, mugs. We have hats now, different colors. Think you'll like the options that we have for you. And a reminder, the Super Bowl is in a couple of hours, and the Sports Camp Podcast is giving out 60 bets for the upcoming game because it is Super Bowl 60 after all. So if you want some last-second Super Bowl picks, check out the Sports Camp Podcast as they have you covered with 60 bets for the upcoming game between the Patriots and the Seahawks. Anyway, moving on into the recap of the final in Montpellier. We won everything. Went perfectly. Went exactly according to plan. For the lock, we had Felix in straight sets at minus 155. It was juicy. Still liked it. And what do you know? Felix did win in straight sets. A nice winner there. For the dog, nice win as well. We did double up with Felix, but we also threw in the over 20.5 games. We've seen a bunch of tie breaks in Montpellier. Thought we'd end up having at least one more, and we did, as Felix Manarino had a pretty straightforward first set. Once again, Manarino is horrific in first sets. And then he woke up, served well in the second set, did not get broken, but Felix did end up winning in straight sets to cash the money line portion, and the match did end up going over the total because the breaker ended up helping. So nice winner there for the lock in dog. Really never in doubt. Yes, Manarino had a pretty lucky mini break advantage in the breaker because he had a check swing return that barely went in. But either way, Felix immediately got the mini break back, and then ended up getting a couple more to wrap up the match. But really never in doubt, Felix was the better player by a wide margin over the course of the match, as he ended up winning in straight sets. So once again, catch the lock and dog. Nice sweep for us to wrap up Montpellier. On top of that, we also won the Felix outright. We did pick him to defend his title, as he was a 5-1 price, and it worked out, as of course he ended up winning the title last year, successfully defended the title this year. He is a monster on indoor hard courts, and he proved it once again on Sunday. So for the record, Felix now has 9 ATP titles. Fun fact, 8 of the 9 titles have been indoor hard court. So once again, when I mentioned Felix being a top 5 player in the world on hard court, indoor hard court, I feel like the results speak for themselves. Once again, 9 titles, 8 of them are indoor hard court titles. He's a monster, especially with the serve, and he was able to dominate the fast courts in Montpellier for the second straight year. Nice winner, though, for us. Add another outright to the collection. It was a pretty interesting tournament. A lot of the favorites did lose early on, but Felix, we did pick, and he was able to get the job done as he ran the table. So overall, great episode. Once again, we won everything. The lock cashed, the dog cashed, the outright cashed, and there you go. So hopefully you made some money. You should have if you backed the episode, either for the outrights or for the episode for the final in Montpellier. Going through the stats, though, once again, Felix did not face a break point in the entire match, so Manarino really just had no chance to return. Felix, just for reference, won 87% of his first serve points. He won 54% of the second serve points, and he landed 78% of his first serve. So if you're going to be winning 87% of your first serve points and you're going to be landing roughly 80%, you're not going to lose, and we saw that happen here. Manarino got broken immediately in the first game of the match, got broken again to end the first set, and then after that, it was a hold fest. But either way, Felix converted in the tiebreak, got the job done, and he was able to help us win a couple of bets, including a nice 5-1 outright. Now, besides that, looking at the comment section here, I see Matt stopping by saying that the Golden Swing is here. The bye is weeks. Yes, we are starting that with Argentina, of course. A couple of upcoming clay events as well, but we are wrapping up the initial hard court swing, so to speak, with, of course, Dallas and with, once again, Rotterdam. So keep that in mind. But yes, the clay slate does officially begin. I will point out there have been a couple of clay matches already, if you've been following the international tennis landscape, because we have had some Davis Cup ties, which have been taking place on clay. Fun match between Quinn and Morozin yesterday, and Quinn did win 13-11 in the final set breaker. But either way, we have seen some clay matches already, if you have been following the Davis Cup. Besides that, though, once again, should be a pretty fun week for the upcoming clay slates, etc. Now, I see a question from Buffalo. What is my favorite play for the Super Bowl? And I want to figure out which prop I want to go with, because I did end up doing a prop show on the Propcast a couple of days ago for the Super Bowl. So let me just pick my favorite play. My favorite play is going to be Stephon Diggs' longest catch under 17.5 yards at -114. He hasn't had a 15-plus yard catch all postseason, and Seattle's good against wide receivers. I think Diggs will be the security blanket, but I think that number's too high. Stephon Diggs, give me the longest reception under 17.5 yards at -114 as my best bet for the game. Moving on to the actual preview of the 3 events for the week. Now, for the actual order, we're going to go chronologically as always. So Rotterdam will be first, followed by Buenos Aires, and then we'll do Dallas last. So starting off with Rotterdam. So the last couple of iterations, we've seen the best players win, as Alcaraz beat de Minaur. Year prior, Sinner beat de Minaur. So Medvedev beat Sinner. So Sinner has made the final in 2 of the last 3, but he's not here for this iteration. Neither is Alcaraz. So we actually have a pretty open field, since Alcaraz and Sinner are nowhere to be found. And then I forgot to mention, Felix also won a couple years ago as he beat Tsitsipas in the final. So we have no quarter odds, by the way, for any of the 3 events. I could have waited for quarter odds, but of course it is Super Bowl day, and I'm sure a lot of people are busy, so I decided to get the episode out early. So I sacrificed the actual quarter markets for the sake of getting early content. But the point is, we have seen a lot of star players win: Alcaraz, Sinner, Medvedev, and we mentioned a second ago, Felix on indoor hard court has been really good. So not many surprising winners over the last couple of years here in Rotterdam. Now, for the actual outrights, in this market, I want to read out the odds first. So you have de Minaur, who's the favorite at +250. I'll point out once again, he is the 2-time runner-up here. So he has been making it to the final. Unfortunately, ran into the best 2 players in the world. This year is his opportunity to finally get over the hump and win a title in Rotterdam. Medvedev is at 550. Felix, fresh off the title in Montpellier, is at 6-1. Bublik is at 10-1. Hurkacz is at 12-1. Norrie at 16-1. Berg's at 18-1. Tsitsipas is 18-1 as well. Kashanov 18-1. Umber's at 20-1. Munar at +2,000. Greek Sport 25-1 if you want to go for the home country Dutch angle. You have Dzanchulp, same thing, 25-1. Fees is at 28-1. We saw him make his return in Montpellier. Wawrinka, 30-1. You kind of get the point. So for the actual favorites, we'll start off with the, once again, path for de Minaur, because he is the favorite. Interesting first-round match. Does have Fees in the first round, who we saw look pretty good in Montpellier before getting buried by Felix, but Felix did win the title, so I guess that is excusable. But either way, we saw Fees look fine. I don't think he looked amazing, but I thought he looked good enough. I think de Minaur, though, should beat him. I think he'll wear him down over time, but I think de Minaur should get the job done. If Fees was fully healthy and he was fully back, then there might be a potential upset, but I do think with Fees playing one event since his return, I just think he's not going to be able to handle de Minaur if he looks the same as he did in the Aussie Open. Give me de Minaur in that one, but I like his overall path if you expect him to get past Fees. Vukic and Wawrinka, I think de Minaur should beat either of those guys. Dzanchulp, Rinderknech, or Tsitsipas. Fun first-round match if you like really bad returning between Tsitsipas and Rinderknech. But the point is, we know Tsitsipas has owned de Minaur in the past, but he's been a mess for the last couple of months, if not a year already at this point. So not exactly many guys I trust Dzanchel, Rinderknech, and Tsitsipas, I think de Minaur, with this current form that we saw in the Aussie Open, should be able to get into the quarters relatively easily and beyond. So I do think de Minaur has some value. I understand it's a pretty cheap number for de Minaur at 275, which I found, but I do think that it makes sense. We know that the courts here are not as fast as you might think compared to most indoor hard courts. For example, Montpellier and Dallas are both faster by a decent amount compared to Rotterdam. I think he'll look sharp in the slower hardcourt environment. I think that de Minaur should look pretty good in general as the two-time defending runner-up. I'll pick him to win at 275. I like the draw in itself, and I do think that with his immediate section being full of, I'd say, untrustworthy players, I think de Minaur has a decent path. I'll go for him there at 275. Moving on to the next option, you have Medvedev at around 550. Now, he's in the same half as de Minaur, so this could be a very interesting competitive semifinal matchup. However, I do think Medvedev's path is interesting. It does peak pretty early in terms of difficulty, and gets easier as the quarter progresses. So he has Humbert in the first round. For the record, he's 1-3 lifetime against Humbert, so not exactly a good head-to-head record for Medvedev. Now, against Fucsovics probably in the second round, then most likely Nori in the quarterfinals. So once again, you could argue that Medvedev does have a tough path early, but if he gets past Humbert, it does open up, so to speak, for the second, for the second quarter. So Medvedev, I understand if you want to make the argument. However, I'm not going to take him. I think 550 is too cheap for a guy that has a bad head-to-head record against a good indoor hardcore player in Humbert. And I do think that, once again, him facing off against de Minaur in the semis is not exactly a gimme. It's been very tough in the head-to-head. It's been very competitive. And de Minaur has seemed to gone up a level since we saw him in the 2025 slate. He showed up here in the Aussie Open, and he looked fantastic. I think de Minaur should have looked good. We saw Medvedev get killed by Tien in the Aussie Open. I can see a similar path where de Minaur just goes wall mode and Medvedev gets frustrated and eventually does lose. But I don't really like the price at 550. I'll pass on him there. Yes, I know that he's a former champion, but I do think Medvedev needed a bigger price for me to consider. I found a 6-1 wasn't good enough. I thought I needed like 750 to consider it. But based on that price, I'm going to pass. Was not really interested for that outright. Moving on, though, to the third option here, you have Felix, who's around 650 to win his second straight tournament. Now, for Felix, I have to point out that the actual draw in itself is favorable. I'll put it that way. So unlike Medvedev, he does not have a tough first-round match, or in theory like de Minaur, who has fees. Felix has a pretty solid draw. He has Popyrin, who's been terrible for about a year. Popyrin went to a challenger. That's how bad he's been recently. But you're looking at Felix, who has Popyrin, followed by Morozin or Bergs. That should be a fun match in itself in the first round. But the best player in his quarter is Griekspoor, who's been horrible so far this season, and he has Pericard in the first round. So I like the draw for Felix. Now, of course, the concern will be the fatigue, but I do think Felix having a pretty straightforward event. He only dropped one set in the entire tournament, and he had a bye in the first round. I think Felix should look fine. We have seen him play in back-to-back weeks before, and he's had some success. I do think the draw is favorable. Unlike Medvedev and de Minaur, he's in the bottom half of the draw, so I do think that half is weaker than the top half. I'm going to take him. I think after winning a 5-1 last week on his outright, I think he's earned enough trust for me to go back to him. He's really good on indoor hardcourt. Once again, 9 career titles, 8 of them indoors. The serve's dangerous. The forehand's dangerous. I think that his overall game is extremely well equipped to handle the courts here. And 650, I think, is a good price. He is a former champion, as I said before. Yes, fatigue could play a factor. If you want to pass on it, I get it. But I do think the price in itself with that draw is quite favorable. I'll take Felix there at 650. Now, for the other options here, Bublik I thought about at 10-1, but I hate his draw. So Hurkacz is at 12-1, and he plays against Bublik in the first round. Now, I know Hurkacz has been kind of a head case recently. Bublik, we know, has been very good as he's a top 10 player. Still a very tough opening match for two guys that can be very tough to break. So I didn't like the draw for Bublik at all. And I think for that reason, I ended up passing on him. As Bublik, in theory, if he ends up getting past Hurkacz, can get past Struff and Khachanov, etc., in that third quarter. But the first round match is very tricky. It was kind of like my thoughts for Medvedev, where I just didn't like the price return for a guy that does have a very tricky first round match. So Bublik I passed on, Hurkacz I passed on, Nori is not good enough, Bergs is not good enough, Tsitsipas has been terrible lately, Khachanov has not been good lately, Humbert, I think playing Medvedev in the first round makes me want to avoid him entirely. The point is, really not much depth to this field in terms of title-winning caliber guys, in my opinion. So I just went chalk here. I got two guys. I got Dimenauer at 275, and I have Felix at 650. And I got nobody else. So I went relatively chalk. I would have considered Bublik if he had an easier path, but Hurkacz in the first round is not ideal, so I passed on him as well. But once again, give me two guys in Rotterdam. That's going to wrap it up for the outrights here for Rotterdam. Before we get into the outrights in Buenos Aires, a reminder that we are brought to you by our sponsor, which is Kalshi. So if you want to make some real money predictions, go to the Kalshi platform. Legal in all 50 states. They have a ton of options for trading on the big games, sides, totals, props, halftime show, national anthem, all the fun stuff. Besides sports, they also have markets for politics and even entertainment and the weather. And a reminder, if you are new to Kalshi, great sign-up deal courtesy of us. Get 20 bucks for free when you sign up with the code SGPN. That's Kalshi, Kalshi, code SGPN for free 20 bucks to sign up at Kalshi. We're also brought to you by Rebet, the number one social sports booking casino out there, available in 35 plus states, including Texas and California. Get on the action with Rebet and a good sign-up deal courtesy of us. Get 100% purchase match up to $100 with the code SGPN. That's Rebet, code SGPN, to capitalize on that sign-up bonus. Once again, code SGPN at Rebet. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the outrights in Rotterdam. Time to move on into the only clay event on the card, Buenos Aires. Now, for the recent winners, Fonseca, I believe, won his first ever ATP title in this event last year, beating Cerundolo in straight sets. Diaz Acosta had the Cinderella run in, once again, this tournament a couple years ago as the local Argentine got the job done there, beating Jari in the final. We saw Alcaraz beat Nori the year prior, and Ruud beat Schwartzman the year before that. So Buenos Aires is usually fun, usually unpredictable, and we'll see what happens in this one. Once again, we have no Alcaraz, we have no Sinner, so we have a lot of potential long shots. We know clay, especially in Argentina, has been known to be a pretty solid ground for long shots, and we'll see if that ends up working out once again in this event. Fonseca wasn't really a long shot. Diaz Acosta was a serious long shot. Alcaraz, we know Ruud's very good in these ATP 250s on clay. So recently it's been a bit chalky, but we have seen some underdogs before make some good runs. Diaz Acosta won, Jari made a final, Nori made a final, and there you go. So we'll see what happens, but once again, no quarter odds for this event. Now, for the outrights, I have to point out most books do not have this actual market posted because qualifying is going on right now. I did find one book that had a line, so I am using Bet Rivers, but if you want to wait it out and see if there are better prices, you can do so. But once again, I did not have that luxury. So the prices I'll mention are Bet Rivers lines. If you want to wait it out, you might be able to wait for DraftKings and other books to open up their pricing, so you might find a better price. But either way, I'm looking at the outrights here. Cerundolo is at 3-1. Fonseca is at 350. So the two finalists from last year are back once again, and they're pretty cheap in terms of pricing. Baez at 650. We saw it look good on hard court, made the final in Auckland before losing to Mensik. But either way, he has been playing well so far this year. Echeverry still never won a title, but he is the home country guy at 8-1. Darderi's at 9-1. Comasagna 11-1. Navone 14-1. Desir 15-1. Tabilo at 17-1. Carabelli at 20-1. Nava at 24-1. Dzumhur 25-1. Altmaier 25-1. Buse 25-1. Talented young Peruvian player. You have Martinez at 25-1. The other Cerundolo, JM Cerundolo, at 30-1. Diaz Acosta, former champion, 33-1. Coria, 33-1. You kind of get the point. So for the outright, starting off with the favorite here, Cerundolo's favored over Fonseca despite Fonseca winning the title last year, which is interesting. Now, part of it's based on the draw. Cerundolo does have a bye, then probably to Zoomer in the second round. I will point out that it was not listed on the outright market. Berrettini, though, is actually here for this event. So Berrettini's in the same quarter as Cerundolo. Will he look good? I don't know, because health is always a concern for Berrettini. It's why I skipped the Aussie Open. We'll see how he looks, but the point is he can be quite dangerous. He's minus 1,000 against Coria in the first round. So Berrettini, if he is back, could really be the dark horse candidate of the field. However, I couldn't take him because, one, I don't trust him physically in terms of his fitness, and two, I didn't have a price. For whatever reason, Bet Rivers did not list him on the outright market, so I will point out Berrettini is here for the event. Now, Cerundolo, look, I think that he's a very good player. We saw he had a good run in the Aussie Open as he beat Rublev in straight sets. He won a couple of rounds. However, Cerundolo is a guy who is still very, I'd say, tricky to back because the inconsistency with his game is very noticeable. And when you want to back Cerundolo for outrights, you want a better price than 3-1. I don't think 3-1 is a good enough price. I get that he's a home country guy. He made the final last year. I understand all that. But I need a much bigger price for Cerundolo. Clay is going to be a good surface for Cerundolo. It is his best overall surface. However, I really just don't trust him to get over the finish line. He might end up making it to a final. That wouldn't shock me. But the pricing alone is just not good enough for a guy who we know tends to self-destruct at various points in events. Now, he can piece together a great run. We have seen it before because we have seen him make good runs in, I'm drawing a blank. It's the Croatian event in Umag. We saw him win the title. He beat Musetti in the final. So we have seen him go God mode before on clay. But I do think that the price is just not high enough for Cerundolo. So I'm going to pass on him. I get that the path is okay. Berrettini maybe can be a dark horse. I'm not going to back that. But in theory, if Cerundolo lost to a healthy Berrettini, it wouldn't totally shock me. I'll point out, though, that Cerundolo and Fonseca are in the same half of the draw. So there will be no exact rematch in a final. They might face off in the semis, which should be interesting. Fonseca has an interesting draw. He has a bye, followed by Tabilo or Diaz-Acosta. Same quarter as Etcheverry. So it could be interesting. Fonseca we have not seen much of this season. We saw him lose immediately to Spizzirri in the first round of the Aussie Open, and he's been battling some injuries, and since then he has not played. So Fonseca coming in a bit cold turkey here. We'll see how he looks on clay for the first time in the season. Defending champion, he should look okay. But 350 is also a price that's just not good enough for me. You're looking at the pricing alone. And 350 for a guy that has not played since the Aussie Open, has not played clay all year. And on top of that, the draw is fine. Could be tricky if Cerundolo ends up facing off against him in the semis. And I think unlike Cerundolo, I think he does have an easier quarter. Tabilo can be tricky, but I think Fonseca's better. Etcheverry can be tricky too. I think Fonseca's better. I think Fonseca I like more than Cerundolo for the sake of pricing. But with the injuries and with the lack of playing time recently, I'm not interested at 350. I need a better price for Fonseca, so I'll pass on him there. Not interested in that price point. So the question opens up, where am I going for the outright? So it was mentioned before. In fact, the first comment for the live stream was Matt mentioning the Baez weeks. Yeah, we see eye to eye. Give me Baez at 650. I think that he's played very well. The fact that he was good on hard court, I know it doesn't really matter because he tends to be a clay specialist, but I do think it might add some confidence. The fact that he was able to enter his extremely, I'd say, uncomfortable surface and thrive, I think will actually result in what could be a solid morale boost for him. And we already know that he's great in this environment in general. The path I like, he has a bye. He's going to be in the third quarter of this event. He has Buse probably in the second round, who's good, but I think Baez is better. The best player in his quarter is either Comasagna or Carabelli, who coincidentally play against each other in the first round. Navone could be tricky, but I do think that Baez is the best player in this quarter. I like that he's able to avoid Fonseca and Cerundolo until the final. I like the draw. 650, you could argue, is a bit cheap. So once again, if you want to wait for other books to open up their markets for the outrights, you might be able to get Baez maybe at like 9-1. But for the sake of the show, I'll give out 650. I think that he's played great tennis so far this year. He's been active. He's been good. And of course, he has been very good over the years in the clay events. I'll go Baez at 650. I think that he's really built for success here. And I do think that the path for him is quite favorable. Moving on to Etcheverry, not 8-1 look. He's never won a title. Same quarter as Fonseca. He'd have to get through Fonseca and Cerundolo and Baez. Not interested. I'm passing on Etcheverry at 8-1. Darderi, we saw have some success in the Aussie Open as well. Had some cramping issues, but the point is he has been playing very well, at least when he's been healthy. And we know that he's also a monster on clay. We saw last year he won back-to-back titles. He ended up winning in Umag. He's really good on clay. Now, Darderi is going to be the fourth quarter, and I like his draw too. Has a bye, Barrios Vera probably in the second round, who I don't think is very good. Same quarter as Martinez, Altmaier, and JM Cerundolo. They play against each other first, and then against Darderi. I'm taking Darderi. I think Darderi is really good. Now, of course, the problem is we have Baez and Darderi, so we're automatically losing one of these guys entering the final because they would play against each other in the semis. But Darderi is really good. 9-1, I think is a good price. Yes, cramping could be an issue, but looking at the recent winners of the event one more time, with Fonseca, Diaz Acosta has a very solid top spin lefty forehand, Alcaraz we know, and Ruud. A lot of firepower, especially from the forehand side, and I do think that, once again, Darderi has a filthy forehand, and I think that it's very underrated. It's why he was able to win some rounds, beating Cashano, for example, in the Aussie Open. It's because the serve and the firepower with the forehand are noticeable. I think he's a very good clay player, and I think that he can be quite dangerous here with this draw. I'll go Darderi at 9-1. Once again, you could wait to see what other books open up the pricing at for Darderi. You'll probably find a better number than 9-1. So if you want to wait it out, you might be able to get yourself a better number. But I do think that it's going to be a very interesting tournament, and I do think that Baez and Darderi are more appealing. I want to go for the bottom half of the draw. I think there are just more talented players in the top half. So for the pricing, Fonseca and Cerundolo, not interested. They are too cheap. Baez and Darderi, though, I'm intrigued. I'll go for those two as my choices for the event. Now, the question is, are there any long shots I want to go with? And Navone is not long enough at 14-1. Still an abysmal server. I think he's a very good clay player, but I don't really like the price at 14-1. Degier could be interesting because he does have firepower, but the problem is I don't trust his health, so I don't really know if I want to back him in this price point at 15-1. Tabilo can be interesting at 17-1, but I'll pass there. This is always an event where you can make a case for a bunch of long shots on clay. So if you wanted to make a long shot case for example, JM Cerundolo, I thought about it, but Altmaier's kind of owned him in the head-to-head. I ended up passing on the long shots. I considered it because I recognize that clay brings opportunity, I'd say, for a long shot flyer. I didn't have one, actually. So I went with relative chalk. I picked Baez and Darderi as my only two choices for the outrights here in Buenos Aires. Moving on to the final event, we're going to go to Dallas here. So this will be based on court speed indexed, the fastest court of the week. So keep that in mind. Now, for the recent winners, Shapo beat Ruud last year. Paul beat Giron. Yibing ended up beating Isner in a three-setter, all full of breakers, a couple years ago. And Opelka ended up beating Brooksby in two breakers in the first iteration of this event. Now, for the outrights, have to read out the actual odds first. Shelton is at 3-1. Fritz is at 350. Paul's at 10-1. Tien's at 14-1. Nakashima's at 16-1. Korda is at plus 2,000. You have Dimitrov at plus 2,000. How healthy is he? We don't know. Tiafoe's plus 2,000. Kaboli's been horrible this season, but he's back. He's plus 2,000. Shapo, defending champion, at 20-1. Nicholson plus 2,000. Quinn at 22-1, who won a big clay tie against Morozan on clay in the Davis Cup. A nice job by him. Now he's switching over back to hard court after a pretty good run in the Aussie Open. Fakina, 22-1. Giron 28-1, Opelka 35-1, Kecmanovic 35-1, Spizzirri at 35-1 after having Sinner on the ropes in the Aussie Open. That's kind of going to wrap it up for the actual odds here. Now, or at least for the people that I'm going to mention. Now, I considered a long shot here based on price, but right now I don't have them listed, but I'm willing to talk it out. So I'm going to have to kind of table it for now, but I'll mention the favorites so far. So Shelton is at 3-1. We saw that he had a good run in the Aussie Open before losing to Sinner. What else is new in the quarterfinals? Now, for the path, it's not bad. I mean, Diallo can be tricky because we know Diallo is a good server. The second serve is not great, though. But the point is, Diallo can maybe have Shelton on the ropes. Shelton has not played since the Aussie Open. But the point is, his draw is pretty tough. I think from top to bottom, the depth of competition is the best in Dallas this week. A lot of really good players, and it feels like really none of the favorites have a great draw, so to speak. But Shelton, for example, is Diallo in the first round, Mannarino or Walton in the second round. I'm assuming that Shelton will win that because Mannarino might be tired, but we remember Mannarino did beat Shelton in the U.S. Open last year, so who knows? But he has Tommy Paul in his quarter as well. So really tough section for Shelton. I don't like the price. I think Shelton's proven over the years he's a better 3 to 5 set player than 2 out of 3. I don't trust Shelton at all, and I think that the actual path is very difficult, so I'm going to pass on Shelton. 3-1's not good enough, so I'm not interested at that price point. Fritz is at 350, and his draw is not great either. Giron in round 1, that could be tricky. We know Giron made the final here a couple of years ago, followed by Nakashima or Bellucci. I'm assuming Nakashima, but Nakashima beat Fritz in the last meeting, so I think that could be a difficult path for Fritz as well. Same quarter as well as Tiafoe and Korda. I know Korda's a head case and Tiafoe is a head case too, but the point is not exactly a great draw for Fritz either. I think Fritz is the best player in the field when he's on, but I hate that draw for Fritz, so I'm going to pass on both those guys. I really don't like the pricing for the difficulty that each player has, Shelton and Fritz I'm talking about, for their respective quarters. I'm going to pass. I think the price should be higher. I'm not interested for this actual price point. Moving on, though, to the next one, looking at the other options here. I see Paul at around 10-1. Now, I understand that Paul's in the same quarter as Shelton. I also understand that Paul's a former champion. In fact, he did win the title 2 years ago. I'm going to take him. I found an 11-1. I like that price quite a bit. I think that Paul's immediate match is manageable as he takes on Brooksby. Brooksby could be tricky, but I do think that Paul has more firepower in general, and I think he should end up winning. We've not seen much of Brooksby this season. I think that Paul should beat him, so I'll go for Paul there. Kecmanovic has not been very good this year. He's a head case too. I'll let Mannarino and Shelton and Diallo deal with each other, and then Paul can feast on the scraps. But I like the actual price for Paul for a guy that's won the title here before, a guy that's been historically good in this environment. I think 11-1 is a great price by comparison. I do not think that Shelton should be roughly a fourth of the odds. I just think the pricing is too big on Paul. I have to take it for pricing. Give me Paul at 11-1 as my first choice for Dallas. Moving on, you have Tien at 14-1. Not really a fan of the tournament for him. I think that for the fast-paced courts here, his underwhelming serve should be a bit of a liability. And taking on Cilic and then probably Quinn in the first 2 rounds, and then Caboli potentially in the quarterfinals. Not a fan of the draw, but I think it's mainly based on the skill set. I like Tien as a player. I think he's very solid. But that serve can be problematic, especially on these fast-paced courts, which should somewhat, I don't want to say fully neutralize, but somewhat neutralize the return game for Tien, especially if Cilic just rips bombs all the time. I think that Tien might be an upset alert, actually, in the first round. So I'm going to pass on Tien. I think that this court environment is not really suited for his skill set. So I'm going to pass on Tien at 14-1. However, I am going to take Nakashima at 16-1, who is in the same quarter as Fritz and Tiafoe. But the point is, I do think that Nakashima actually has a solid skill set for this event. We saw him make a final earlier this year, did lose to Medvedev in the final. But the fact is, he made his first final in a couple of years. The serve has been very good. And I do think with the fast-paced courts here, once again, we saw Isner in the final. Opelka won a title here. We have seen good serve bot caliber guys dominate in this environment. I think Nakashima has the forehand and the serve to frustrate Fritz. I can see a couple of breakers in there. Maybe Nakashima steals it. But I do think 16-1 is objectively a solid price for a guy who we saw make a final earlier this year, a guy whose serve is very dangerous on fast-paced courts. I think 16-1 is quite appealing. I'll go for him there as my other choice for the outright. Now, I thought about Tiafoe. I actually did, because he was around 20-1. I found a 22-1. However, he's in the same quarter as Nakashima and Fritz. Not exactly interested. I get that he's on the other half of the quarter, so Ottman, we'll see if he beats. I think he should beat Korda, because Korda has a rematch against Zhang, who beat him in the Aussie Open. So we know Korda is definitely not going to be on my card because I can't stand the guy. Tiafoe, I didn't mind the odds, but I don't trust him enough, even though I recognize 22-1 is not terrible. But Tiafoe has not won a title since 2023, so I'm going to pass on Tiafoe. I thought about the odds, decided not to do it. Now, there was one other guy that I actually thought about. Actually, two. So, Shapo I did not take. I thought about it, but he has a qualifier, then Opelka or Kovacevic in the second round. Could be interesting, but I passed. I thought about Fokina, actually. I think Fokina at 22-1 is interesting. The problem, of course, is he has never won a title, which is always going to be the difficult aspect of backing him. But I like the price at 22-1. A qualifier, then Mickelson or Dimitrov. I think that health-wise, he should beat both those guys right now. The problem is, I think that the fast-paced serve and court could be his undoing. I think similarly to Tien, for a guy that's not exactly a great server, I just question if he'll be able to serve well enough to actually get by. But I did like the price for Fokina at 22-1. I ended up not pulling the trigger on it, but I did like that price. That is the price point I would be targeting if I was going to make an argument for Fokina to win a title. We have seen him earlier this year. He was a lot cheaper of a number, and I think he was favored in an event earlier this year. And I think that 20-something-1 is more the range I would look for Fokina. So I didn't mind the pricing, but I just didn't have the courage to actually take him to win the event. However, I actually am going to go with a good server who I think can actually make some noise. The problem is he's against a very good player in the first round, but you know what? We'll get weird with this. We thought he looked pretty good in the Aussie Open. In fact, he actually ended up beating Shapo in the Aussie Open. I'm going to go for it, actually. Give me Cilic at 50-1. I think 50-1 is a good price for a guy whose serve can be very dangerous, for a guy who has the skill set necessary for success here in Dallas. The problem is against Tien in the first round, so I recognize he could lose early, but I do think for the sake of the actual match in itself, Cilic is only plus 140 in the first round, so he's very live to win against Tien based on the odds makers, and I do think that 50-1 is just objectively a very large price for a guy that can use his serve and forehand to find ways to survive in the event. Now, for the other players in this draw, I think Cilic, if the serve is on, he could beat Quinn. I think Kaboli's been a mess. I'll go after that second quarter. Spaziri maybe ends up beating Kaboli, who knows. First quarter, if Nakashima or Tiafoe end up getting out of the first quarter, and we see Fritz lose, I think there's a path. 50-1, though, for a very good server like Cilic, I think is a very appealing price. Yes, it could blow up in my face, but I'm fine with that. I think 50-1 for a guy serving generally well on fast-paced courts really has a recipe for success. Give me Cilic to kind of steal the Shapo success from last year, which is a bit of a longer shot, a guy with a lot of firepower, and a guy who, if he finds his groove, can really be a thorn in anybody's side. And we saw a couple years ago, he won a title in China, solely relying on the serve and the forehand. But we saw him win a couple of matches in the Australian Open, had a double bagel against Altmaier early in the first round. Then he won in straight sets, beat Chapo in straight sets. Then he ended up taking a set off Ruud, did end up losing in 4. I thought he looked good. The main concern for Cilic is health. But right now he's healthy. He looked good in the Aussie Open. And I think that 50-1 is a good price. So that's my super long shot for the week. Give me Cilic at 50-1 as my long shot dart throw for Dallas. So once again, the outrights we're going to go with for the events. We have no quarter odds, so apologies there. For the outrights in Rotterdam, starting there, going to go relatively chalky. We have Dimmenauer at 275, and we have Felix to go back-to-back in Montpellier and in Rotterdam back-to-back weeks at 650. For Buenos Aires, we're going to go a bit chalky, but not as chalky as Rotterdam. We are going to go with Baez at 650, and we are going to go with Darderi at 9-1. So we're skipping over Cerundolo, and we're skipping over Fonseca. Did not like the price for both of those finalists from last year to make it back all the way through to win the title. Did not like the price on those two guys, so we passed over with Baez and with Darderi. And for Dallas, last but not least, this is going to be the most unpredictable event, according to me, based on the outright prices. After taking only single-digit guys for the odds, we did take 3 double-digit guys. For the outrights in Dallas, we skipped over Shelton. We skipped over Fritz. We ended up going with Paul at 11-1. We have Nakashima at 16-1. And we have Cilic as our serious long shot at 50-1. Anyway, it's going to wrap it up for the outrights of those 3 events. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. Before we get into the lock and dog, a reminder that brought to you by our sponsor, which is Arctic Fantasy. So you can once again check out the pick'em entries in every single sport. You can mix and match, get in on Underdog, and win 5,000 times your money, up to 5,000 times if you do a pick'em entry with a bunch of options. And once again, you end up winning. You can win up to 5,000 times your entry. And a reminder for new customers, great sign-up deal. Play just $5 and $5 bonus funds when you sign up with the promo code SGPN at Underdog Fantasy. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. They've been great in college and for the NBA recently. Super easy to sign up for. You could also check out the model building process, build your own. You could use the Rhythm house model for picks as well, or use the leaderboard and borrow models from other people that have been successful. But once again, a couple ways to experiment with the model building on Rhythm. And if you want to go premium, use the code SGPN25. We download the app and you'll get a nice quarter for the first month. That's Rhythm, RATHMM, code SGPN25 for a quarter for the first month at Rhythm. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the preview of the outrights in Buenos Aires, Dallas, and Rotterdam. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. Coincidentally, both the lock and dog are going to be in Rotterdam. I just found matches I liked, so no offense to Dallas or Buenos Aires. We're going to focus on Rotterdam for the sake of the lock and dog. For the lock, going to a match between Fucsovics and Den Oden. We're going to go with Fucsovics straight sets at minus 135. That was on DraftKings. Most books at minus 145 or minus 150. I found a 135. I'm going to grab it. Now, Fucsovics, we know his issue over the years has been durability, but we know that he has been very good in this event over the years. So Fucsovics has been here many times. He is 12-5 lifetime in this environment. 10 of those 12 wins were in straight sets. He was also a runner-up in this event in 2021. Did lose to Rublev in the final. Point is, though, he's been quite good here, historically speaking, and I do think that with his health right now being under control, I think he'll look sharp in this event. Den Oden, though, is a horrific tennis player on hard court. He is 3-14 straight up in his last 17 hard court matches. 3-14. Yes, I know that he's Dutch. He has crowd support. I understand that, once again, Fucsovics can occasionally punt some sets. But he's just a mess on hard court, and I do think that Fucsovics should be able to beat up on a much weaker opponent, including the scheduling spot. So Fucsovics has not played since the Aussie Open, so he should be healthy. As for Den Oden, he was actually playing in India over the weekend in the Davis Cup. So he played 2 matches back-to-back days. He played on Saturday and Sunday, and now he has to play on, right now, Monday. We'll see if it ends up getting moved. But either way, he has to go from India flying roughly 8 or 9 hours to Rotterdam to play against Fucsovics in his first ever ATP match. Now, you might argue, well, he might withdraw from the event. First of all, it ends up voiding if he does. Second of all, it's in his home country. And third of all, it's his first ever ATP match. So he doesn't make really any main draws. And the fact is, the prize money is probably something he needs because he has not actually been in an ATP draw before. So I think he has to show up for this event. But you're going to give me a guy who's 3-14 straight up in his last 17 on hard court, a guy that played 2 matches in back-to-back days over the weekend in India, and now he has to fly 9 hours to the Netherlands to play against a guy who's 12-5 lifetime in this event. I love the spot. I love the price. I think 135 is very solid when you don't even factor in the travel. But when you factor it in, 135 is too cheap. So give me Fucsovics straight sets as my lock for the show. For the dog, I saw a question earlier from the live chat, and somebody was asking if I had thoughts on the Griekspoor and Pericard first set over. The problem is the first set tiebreak is minus money. It is around minus 110. However, I found a nice prop on Bet365 that's basically the same thing, but I found it at plus money. I got Griekspoor and Pericard first set under half a break, so no combined breaks in the first set at plus 110. If you cannot find this available to you, you can still take the first set over 12.5 at around minus 110, but I found a plus 110 by taking the basically same principle, but adding an extra caveat where both guys cannot break to get a 7-6. You need just complete holds. You need 12 straight holds in the first set. I'm going to go for it. Griekspoor is an abysmal returner, and Pericard's an awful returner too. So I see a bunch of holds, obviously, between the two of them. Pericard has now recorded a break in the first set in 10 of his last 12 matches. Griekspoor has now recorded a first set break in 6 of his last 8 matches. So both guys, in addition to being bad returners in general, are very bad early in matches at returning. I think even though the court speed is a bit slower in Rotterdam compared to, for example, Montpellier or compared to Dallas, I do think both guys should serve bombs anyway. Both guys are horrific in return games, and I just see a pretty straightforward breaker in the first set. I am going to point out, even with these slow court speeds, that 4 of Griekspoor's last 5 sets in this event have ended in tie breaks. The one exception was a 7-5 third set against Tsitsipas. So we've seen Griekspoor involved in a bunch of tie breaks here over the years. I think it'll happen again. Pericard should be fine. We saw got injured against Gia, got hit in the eye with a tennis ball. He hasn't played, though, for a couple of days. I think he'll be fine, as that was a first-round match. So I think that, once again, he should be fine physically. But simply put, both guys are horrific at returning, and it's a way of getting a first-set tiebreak, which is probably going to happen courtesy of 0 breaks at plus money, which is basically not available in any other book. So if you have Bet365, take this prop. If you don't have it, just take the over for the first set, which you can get at minus 110. But I found plus money, so I'll go for that as my dog for the show. So once again, the lock and dog, we're going to go with the lock being Fucsovics in straight sets at minus 135. For the dog, we are going to go with Griekspoor and Pericard first set under half a break combined at plus 110. To wrap it up for the show, back once again for the quarterfinals, guaranteed for Buenos Aires and for Rotterdam. It depends on when the lines actually come out, because Dallas can be quite tricky if the matches end up taking place at night. So there is a chance we have to pull the plug on Dallas, so keep an eye out for that. We might only be able to do Buenos Aires and Rotterdam. So keep that in mind, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, till next time, a reminder, like and subscribe on YouTube. Check out the podcast on Spotify or Apple, or on the SGPN app. And a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Till next time.